My name is Elwood. Not a name you hear much these days, I know. My mother said it sounded dignified. I used to hate it. Now, I kind of like that no one else shares it. Fitting for someone who spent the last 4 years trying to disappear. I wasn't planning to write this. In fact, I wasn't planning to feel anything today. Just show up, sit quietly, watch my son cross the stage, and leave before anyone noticed I was there. But then she walked in, Elise, and the world tilted for just a second. If you've ever had someone burn through your life like a wildfire, then you'll understand why I felt a tremor run through me. It wasn't love. It wasn't hate either. It was something colder, like recognizing a wound that never really scarred over. Let me take you back because I need you to understand not just what happened, but who I was, who we were. Elise and I met at a community fundraiser in our hometown of Madisonville, Kentucky. She was on stage talking fast and waving her arms like the whole world needed to hear her ideas. I was just the guy folding chairs afterward. We were opposites. She moved like lightning, and I moved like molasses. We dated, married, had our son, Jude, all within 5 years. Life wasn't bad. It wasn't fireworks either, but we made it work. I was a high school English teacher. She worked in real estate. Our lives hummed along, predictable, average, until they weren't. There wasn't one big explosion. It was more like a slow leak. First, her phone was always face down. Then she started working open houses that didn't line up with the company calendar. I checked once. She said I was being paranoid. I believed her, or at least I chose to. Then came the night of Jude's middle school play. I sat alone in the 3rd row. She texted that she couldn't make it. Emergency showing. One of those big fish buyers. An hour later, I walked into a diner to grab dinner. And there she was in a corner booth, laughing, holding someone's hand across the table. I couldn't see his face, just the back of his head, short salt and pepper hair, tan jacket, but I didn't need to see more. The intimacy was unmistakable. I left before she saw me. I didn't say a word that night or the next day. I waited a full week and then I left. I didn't scream, didn't accuse, didn't take the TV or the bed frame. I just packed 2 bags and left her a note that read, "I won't fight you. Take care of Jude. I hope you find what you're chasing." She didn't reply. Not then, not ever. I figured I'd hear from my son eventually. But days turned to months, and Jude, only 13 at the time, stopped replying to my messages. She had him, all of him, and I vanished. That was 4 years ago. This morning, I got dressed in the same jacket I wore when I left that house. I didn't expect anyone to recognize me. I've got more gray in my beard now, a bit of a limp from a fall last winter. Different man, same regret. I took a seat near the back of the auditorium. Not with family, not with the proud parents cheering for scholarships and valedictorian speeches. I was just there to see Jude. And then, minutes before the ceremony began, I felt it. You know how dogs can sense storms before they hit? That's how it felt when she walked in. Elise in a blue dress. Not glamorous, not showy, but sharp, collected, confident, like the years hadn't touched her. She scanned the room like a queen inspecting her kingdom until her eyes landed on me. And for the first time in 4 years, her entire face collapsed. She froze mid-step. Her lips parted like she might say something, but nothing came out. She clutched her purse tighter, like she needed to anchor herself to something real. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just sat there watching the woman who burned down my life finally realize I've been standing in the ashes all along. And that's when it all began unraveling, because Jude had something planned, and neither of us saw it coming. The auditorium lights dimmed, and I watched Elise take her seat across the aisle, 2 rows ahead. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Her spine was rigid, like she was holding her entire world together with pure tension. Her date, or partner I should say, never showed. She came alone. That surprised me. I'd always imagined she'd bring him, the one from the diner, the one she chose instead of our family. But maybe she didn't want him there. Or maybe he didn't want to be seen. The principal took the stage. There was a slideshow. Kids as toddlers, kids in braces, kids in awkward middle school phases. I saw Jude's face flash across the screen in a photo I'd never seen. standing on a rocky hill, beaming, arms wide like he'd conquered the world. He looked older. He looked good. My throat tightened. Then came the roll call. Jude Langley, my son. He was third to last. I hadn't seen him in person since he was 13. Now he was 18, walking across the stage in a deep green robe, tassel swinging. He looked straight ahead, and then he stopped, dead in the middle of the stage. Instead of shaking the principal's hand and walking off like the others, Jude turned toward the audience. The crowd gave a polite applause, assuming he just wanted a moment, but something was off. He cleared his throat and reached into his robe pocket. My heart was pounding, and I didn't know why. Then he spoke. "I know this isn't on the program," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "But I need to say something." Gasps, whispers. I saw a teacher shift uncomfortably. Elise sat upright like she'd been zapped with a cattle prod. "I wasn't sure my dad would be here today," Jude continued, scanning the crowd. "We haven't talked in 4 years, and that's mostly because I believed something that wasn't true. I believed a lie." He paused, and I felt every pair of eyes scanning the crowd now. "But I want everyone to know something. My dad didn't abandon me. He didn't give up. He left because he had to, and I didn't understand that until this year." He looked right at me. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said, "for not asking you your side, for shutting you out. I was just a kid." The auditorium went silent. You could hear the AC hum and some old man cough in the back row. My hands trembled on my knees. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Jude pulled a small envelope from his robe. "Dad, this is for you," he said, holding it up. I stood up slow, unsure, walking down the aisle while everyone watched. I felt like I was walking through molasses. It wasn't fear. It was disbelief. This wasn't the son I left behind. This was a young man I didn't know. A man who'd clearly seen something, discovered something. When I reached him, he stepped off the stage, breaking the ceremony, and handed me the envelope. "You don't have to open it now," he whispered. "But everything's in there." The principal stepped forward, clearly flustered, and gently guided Jude back onto the stage. The ceremony resumed, but the atmosphere had cracked. No one was listening anymore. They were watching us. I returned to my seat. Elise still hadn't turned around. Her hands were clenched in her lap like stone. Whatever calm she brought into the auditorium had shattered the second Jude opened his mouth. When the ceremony ended, I expected her to rush out, avoid me, disappear again. But she didn't. Instead, she walked up to me, not smiling, not angry. Her voice was quiet, almost dry. "You shouldn't have come," she said. And I responded gently, "I didn't come for you." She opened her mouth to reply, but someone else beat her to it. An older man walked up behind her, wearing the same tan jacket from the diner years ago. His hand touched her lower back, and she flinched. "I told you he'd show up eventually," he said, smirking at me. And that's when it all clicked. He wasn't just a man she dated. He was someone I already knew. And what Jude had put in that envelope, it was about him. I stared at the man for a full 10 seconds before my brain gave me his name. Carter Bledsoe, my former supervisor. I hadn't seen him in years, but the voice, the smug tilt of his mouth, that ridiculous old tan jacket he wore like a uniform, it was all unmistakable. Carter had been my direct manager when I worked at the Regional Educational Board. A politician in a cheap suit, always shaking hands, always whispering things he thought made him sound clever. I hated the guy, to be honest, but I never had a reason to suspect he had any business with my business. Until now. Elise didn't say a word. She didn't introduce him, didn't even look him in the eye. Carter, however, had no such discomfort. "Hell of a speech that boy gave," he said, still looking at me, eyes twinkling like this was all some big joke. Brought tears to a few eyes up in the front rows. "Yours too, I think." I didn't respond. Couldn't. My mind was unraveling memories, threads I had never tied together. Carter used to text Elise sometimes. "Work stuff," she'd said. She mentioned him often back when I worked under him. Said he was annoying but sharp. I never thought to connect them. Why would I? She wasn't that kind of person. Not back then. But now she looked like someone I didn't recognize. Someone trapped in a decision she regretted far too late. I should go, Elise finally muttered, taking a step back. But Carter didn't move. He stood between us like a blockade. That envelope, he said, nodding toward my hand. You open it yet? That's when I knew he was nervous. The calm, grinning Carter I remembered would never have broken eye contact to glance at a stupid piece of paper. Whatever Jude had written, Carter knew what it was. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I just looked him in the eye and said, "Not yet, but it's addressed to me." Elise turned then, fast. Her face was flushed, her breathing shallow. "Don't do this here," she hissed, grabbing Carter's arm. "Let's go. Now." She was spiraling, and if I had any doubt about the truth before, that moment erased it. Carter scoffed but followed her as she stormed off toward the parking lot. She didn't even say goodbye to Jude, who was still standing on the edge of the crowd with his diploma rolled in his hands, like he wasn't sure if it was worth celebrating anymore. I walked over to him, slower this time. People were watching, but I didn't care. Jude looked up as I approached. He looked older than 18. Tired, maybe, or just cracked open by truth, the way most of us are when the people we trust disappoint us deeply for the first time. "She told me you cheated," he said quietly, without even looking up. "Said you left because of guilt." I didn't respond. Not yet. But last year, I borrowed her old phone. She forgot to sign out of her email. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. There were messages from Carter going back years. Stuff I didn't want to see. Stuff I didn't even understand at first. But once I read enough, it clicked. I nodded slowly, letting the silence settle before I spoke. "I never wanted you to hate her," I said. "Even after everything. I thought maybe protecting you from the truth was the only thing I had left to offer." Jude finally looked at me. "That's what made me hate you," he said. "Not knowing. Not being trusted with the truth." He handed me the envelope again, this time with a firmer grip. I wrote everything down. Names, dates. I even printed the emails. "Why?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What do you want me to do with it?" He shrugged. "Whatever you need to. But mostly, I just needed you to know that I know." There was a pause, a deep one. And then, for the first time in 4 years, he hugged me. Just for a second. But it was real. It was enough. Later, I sat in my car in the parking lot while families packed up balloons and posed for photos they'd frame forever. I held the envelope in my lap, hands still trembling slightly. I knew that opening it would mean leaving behind the last bit of peace I had. But I also knew that not opening it would mean letting lies fester for another 4 years. I opened it, and what I read inside changed everything I thought I understood about my past and about what Elise had been hiding. The worst part? This wasn't just betrayal. It was intentional sabotage. The contents of that envelope felt like a punch to the lungs. I sat in the front seat of my car for nearly half an hour without moving. The graduation program still crumpled under my leg. Forgotten. Jude hadn't exaggerated. He didn't even dramatize. What he gave me was surgical. Each page printed in chronological order. Each message between Elise and Carter timestamped, dated, brutally precise. And each one pulling apart the last 5 years of my life in a way that made me question everything I thought I remembered. They had been seeing each other since before I left my job. Maybe even longer. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't lust or emotional confusion. It was cold, planned, strategic. Elise had been feeding Carter private information about budget meetings, school board votes, and internal conflicts from my department long before I suspected anything. I was her inside man, only I didn't know it. And then came the worst part. 2 months before the night I caught them together, the night I left, there were emails discussing how to make me leave. One of them from Carter read, "He's too quiet. He doesn't fight. It has to look like it was his idea to walk. You said he's slipping emotionally. Push that harder. He'll pull the trigger himself. We just have to be patient." And Elise had responded with, "Already working on it. I'll make sure he feels like an outsider in his own house. He hates confrontation." I know him. He'll leave to protect his pride. He always does. I wasn't reading about a relationship that fell apart. I was reading about a slow, methodical execution, and I walked right into it. I thought I left with dignity, with the last shred of self-respect I had. But the truth was far worse. I had been maneuvered like a pawn, and they had counted on my silence. The final few pages of the envelope were financial records Jude had somehow accessed. I couldn't even imagine how he got them. Maybe she left something open or he figured out passwords. But there it was in black and white. A fund transfer from our joint savings account into one of Carter's real estate shell companies a week before I moved out. Not just a few $100, not a loan. It was nearly $47,000. Our emergency savings. Jude's college fund. Money I'd been stashing away for years. Money I never saw again because Elise told me she needed it to stabilize things after I left. She'd guilt me into signing over full financial control during the divorce so Jude wouldn't suffer. I had trusted her even after everything. That was the part that broke me most. That deep down, even when I knew she'd lied, I still wanted to believe she wouldn't steal from her own family. I started my car but didn't drive. Couldn't. My hands were shaking. My ears were hot. It wasn't rage. It was humiliation. And the bitter taste that comes when you realize someone didn't just fall out of love with you. They deconstructed you piece by piece until there was nothing left but silence and blame. She didn't just cheat. She erased me. And for years I let her. The worst irony? I left because I didn't want Jude to be caught in the middle. And yet here he was at 18, doing the very thing I didn't have the courage to do when it counted. He faced the truth. He pulled the curtain back. And instead of shielding himself from it, he put it in my hands. It wasn't revenge. It was redemption. His way of pulling me out of the grave they buried me in. As I sat in that car, I realized I had two choices. I could keep driving like I always did. Vanish again, leave town, go back to my rented apartment in Ashbury, live quietly with my coffee and my books, and pretend none of this mattered. Or I could knock on the front door of the house I used to call home, look her in the eye, and say the one thing I never got the chance to say before. You planned my disappearance. And this time I wouldn't walk away. I didn't rehearse what I was going to say. I just drove through the traffic, through the ache in my chest, through the part of me that begged to turn around. It was only a 30-minute drive back to our old house, but it felt like crossing a decade. I kept imagining the small things. Whether she had changed the curtains, if the front yard still had that lopsided birdbath I bought from a flea market. I hadn't seen the place since the day I left. I never even drove past it. Seeing it again felt like staring at the corpse of a life I used to live. The house looked almost exactly the same. Same red door, same chipped mailbox, same overgrown ivy crawling along the porch railing. But it felt colder, less alive, like it belonged to someone pretending everything was still intact. There were two cars in the driveway, hers and Carter's, that told me what I needed to know. He had moved in, replaced me completely. I half expected to see him watering the garden in my old robe. I knocked twice. No answer. I was about to turn around when the door cracked open. Elise stood there barefoot, holding a coffee mug, her expression stiff as stone. She didn't say my name, didn't ask what I was doing there, just looked me over like I was an intruder who forgot to knock politely. "You shouldn't be here," she said. I met her gaze. "You said that at the graduation, too. I'm starting to think you just don't like being reminded I exist." She sighed through her nose, opened the door wider. 5 minutes. That's all. I stepped into the house. It was hollow. The furniture was the same, but none of it looked lived in. Family photos had been rearranged. Every trace of me was gone. Not a single picture of the three of us. Just her, Jude, and God help me, Carter. There was one where they were standing on a dock, arms around each other like a picture-perfect couple. I wanted to vomit. We sat in the living room. She didn't offer me water. I didn't want any. "I read the emails," I said simply. Her face twitched. "You knew he was my boss," I continued. "You used me to feed him information. And when that wasn't enough, you tore apart our marriage one lie at a time until I walked out. Because you didn't want to be the one to end it. You wanted to come out clean." She didn't deny it. She just whispered, "You were always so easy to leave." That one sentence, flat, unfeeling, hit harder than all the betrayal in that envelope. I wasn't even worth a lie anymore. "But you didn't think Jude would figure it out, did you?" I asked. That got her attention. "I told him you cheated," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Because you left Elwood." What was I supposed to say? That I schemed with your boss to funnel money out of our joint savings and set you up to look like the bad guy? That I chose a man I barely respected over the one who would have forgiven me no matter what? I stood slowly. "You didn't just choose him," I said. "You weaponized my silence. You used who I was against me." Elise didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just sat back in the chair like she was suddenly very tired. "Do you want money?" she asked finally. "Is that why you came?" And that was the moment I truly understood who I was talking to. Not my wife. Not the woman I built a life with. But a stranger who thought everything in the world could be fixed with a transfer. "I didn't come for money," I said. "I came to warn you." Her brow furrowed. "Warn me about what?" I walked to the door, looked back once. "Jude isn't done," I said. "And this time, I'm not shielding you." She didn't follow me, didn't call after me. She just sat there. That night, I stayed in a cheap motel off the interstate, unable to sleep. My mind was spinning, not with rage, but with something worse. Clarity. Jude had started the fire. I had to decide what to do next. And part of me still didn't know if I had the strength to finish what he had begun. But one thing was now certain. The truth was loose, and no one was in control anymore. I didn't expect the call. It came the next day, right around dusk, while I sat on a bench outside the motel with a cup of burnt coffee I didn't even want. The phone buzzed in my jacket. No ID, just a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, I thought maybe it was Elise calling to lash out, or to apologize, or to beg me to keep quiet. But it wasn't her. It was Jude. He didn't waste time. "Hey," he said. "I'm making dinner tonight. You free?" Caught me off guard. So simple, so ordinary, yet so surreal. It had been years since I'd even heard his voice outside of a ceremony. And now he was asking me to come to dinner like nothing had ever happened. Or maybe because everything had. I didn't ask questions. I just said yes. When I pulled up to his apartment an hour later, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. It was a modest building, student rental style, a little run down, but with a tidy front porch and a potted plant by the door that looked like it had been watered on purpose. He opened the door wearing a plain gray t-shirt and jeans. He looked exhausted but alert, like someone who had made a decision and was ready to live with it. "Hope you still eat spaghetti," he said. "I do." Inside, the place was neat. Too neat. Like he'd spent all afternoon making sure every plate was stacked, every pillow fluffed, every sign of mess erased. The kind of cleaning you do when someone important is coming over. There were 2 places set at the table. No music, no TV, just 2 forks, 2 plates, and silence. We ate for a while without speaking. I didn't want to push. I didn't want to say the wrong thing and lose this fragile thread that had formed between us. Finally, he looked up. "She still doesn't know I printed those emails," he said. "She will," I replied gently. He nodded. "I know. Was it you who figured out the bank stuff too?" He shook his head. "That was my roommate. He's a finance major. I asked him to help me make sense of it. I didn't even know what I was looking at. But once he laid it out." He paused. "It was clear what she did. I mean, I always thought you leaving was weird. It didn't feel like something you would do." I took a sip of water. "It wasn't." He stared at his plate for a long time, then quietly said something that broke me open in ways I didn't expect. "I think I blamed you because it was easier than blaming her. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. Sometimes silence is the only answer that fits. I wanted to invite her tonight too," he added. "At first. But I realized I didn't want to hear her side anymore. I've heard it too many times. It's always polished, always half of something." I nodded. "She doesn't know how to tell the whole truth," I said. "She's been pretending for so long. I'm not sure she even remembers it." Jude leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "Do you think she ever loved you?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I thought about our wedding, the early years, the night she held Jude for the first time and whispered, "He's got your nose." I thought about the sound of her laughter when she was tired, the way she'd fall asleep during movies and deny it later. "She loved who she thought I was," I said eventually. But when that image stopped serving her, she changed the picture. Jude sighed. "I think she did the same to me." And just like that, I saw it. The crack in him, the fracture that wasn't about betrayal or lost money or email chains. It was about identity. When someone you believe in unconditionally turns out to be someone else, it doesn't just break trust. It breaks your own reflection. "I'm sorry you had to see it like that," I said. "I'm not," he replied. "I needed to." He got up, cleared our plates, and asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes, even though I rarely drink it at night. Something about the ritual made the world feel steady again. As he poured, he said something I'll never forget. "I don't think I can ever forgive her, but I'm not ready to throw her away either. I just need time. But I don't want that to stop us." I blinked. "Stop us from what?" "From starting over," he said. "I don't care how weird it is. I don't care if we missed 4 years. You're my dad. I want to know you again. I want you in my life." It wasn't a movie moment. No soaring music. No hugs or tears or speeches. Just a young man handing his father a second chance and a quiet seat at a table that used to belong to someone else. And I took it not because I wanted to punish her, but because I finally realized I didn't need her permission anymore. The following week was quiet, and for once, that wasn't a bad thing. Jude and I saw each other twice. We had burgers at a roadside diner where the waitress called everyone Han, and he let me help him build a bookshelf he'd been putting off for months. We didn't talk about the past anymore. That wasn't a rule. It just faded out. He showed me videos from a recent ski trip. I told him about the time I almost adopted a 3-legged dog and changed my mind because the landlord was allergic to complications. We started stitching together new memories, one thread at a time. Then the silence broke. And it wasn't from us. It was her. Elise. I had just come home from a grocery run when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I knew immediately. Some instinct deeper than logic. The cold ripple you feel in your spine when the past decides it's not finished with you. The message was short, just a sentence. "You're turning him against me." I stared at it, blinking. No greeting, no name, just that. I didn't respond. An hour later, I got another, "I deserve to explain myself." Still, I said nothing. I wasn't falling into that rhythm again, the one where I made myself small to make her comfortable. I didn't owe her my peace anymore, but what I didn't expect was what she did next. It was Sunday afternoon. Jude and I had made loose plans to cook something together, maybe catch a movie. I showed up at his place around 5 o'clock, carrying a bag with ingredients for chili and a 6-pack of ginger beer we used to drink when he was a kid. But when he opened the door, he didn't look relaxed. He looked cornered. "She's here," he said. I didn't understand. "Who?" He didn't answer, just stepped aside. And there she was, Elise, sitting on his couch, legs crossed, arms wrapped tight around herself like she was cold or like she wanted to shrink into the cushions and disappear. Her hair was tied up, no makeup, a hoodie that looked far too big. For the first time in my life, she didn't look composed. She looked afraid. "I told her I didn't want a scene," Jude said quietly. "She said she just wanted to talk. That if I didn't let her explain, I'd never understand." "She told you everything already," I replied. "I know," he said, "but I wanted to hear how she'd say it." I nodded slowly, walked past her, placed the grocery bag on the kitchen counter, then sat across from her. No theatrics, no anger, just silence. Elise looked up at me. Her eyes were red. I couldn't tell if she'd been crying or if she just wanted me to think she had. "I didn't expect it to last with him," she began. "With Carter." Jude stayed by the door. "I thought he understood me. I thought I was building something that finally fit. I was tired of feeling like a side character in someone else's life." My jaw tightened, but I let her speak. "I didn't plan to destroy everything," she said. "But once I realized what I'd done, it was already too late. And I knew you'd never fight me. That's who you are. You retreat. You vanish. She looked up. You always vanish, Elwood. It struck me as almost impressive, the way she framed her betrayal as my absence, a narrative where my pain was self-inflicted, my silence a failure. Jude stepped forward. You told me he left because he had someone else. She closed her eyes. I couldn't lose both of you. You did anyway, he said. And you lied to me for years just to stay in control. Elise's voice broke then. Finally. I thought you needed someone to blame. You mean someone other than you, he said. She didn't reply. The air in the room felt like it was filled with nails. Sharp, suspended, waiting to fall. I spoke quietly. I didn't come here to punish you, Elise. I came because our son deserves truth. Not half of it. All of it. You want to explain yourself? Fine. But you're not explaining to me. I stood. You're explaining to him. And with that, I walked out onto the porch, leaving them behind a closed door. Not because I was escaping, but because I had finally stopped running. And inside that room, behind that door, Jude would ask her questions she couldn't dance around anymore. And when it opened again, something would be different. I just didn't know yet whether it would be for better or for worse. I waited outside for nearly 25 minutes. I stood under a sky that was just beginning to turn that deep blue you only see in spring, the kind that feels full of possibility but still carries a bite in the air. I didn't sit down. I didn't pace. I just leaned on the railing and listened to nothing but the sounds of distant traffic and my own breath. Eventually, I heard the door open behind me. I turned, but it wasn't Elise. It was Jude. His face didn't look angry or sad. It looked lighter, like whatever weight had been pressing on his chest for years had finally loosened. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there beside me, mirroring my posture, hands in his pockets. She told the truth, he said eventually. Maybe not all of it, but enough. I nodded. I didn't ask what she said. I didn't need to. She's leaving town, he added. Said she's moving in with her sister in Oregon. Said she needs time to figure out who she is without either of us around. That's probably the first honest thing she's said in a long time, I replied. He smiled a little. I think so, too. We stood in silence again, but this time it wasn't sharp or awkward. It was peaceful. She asked if I hated her, he said, glancing toward the window. I told her no, but I also told her I didn't really know her anymore. And maybe I never did. I looked at him. That's something a lot of us learn later than we'd like. He turned to me fully now. But I told her one more thing. What's that? I said, I know who you are now, and that's enough. Those words nearly knocked the air out of my lungs. Not because they were poetic, but because they were simple, earnest, final. We didn't need to rewrite the past. We just needed to start over. Later that week, I helped him move into a better apartment closer to campus. He introduced me to his girlfriend, a sweet girl named Camille who made us both laugh so hard over dinner we nearly dropped our forks. I found myself smiling more in those few days than I had in the last 4 years combined. I got a new job offer not long after, a teaching position at a smaller school just outside of the city. Nothing fancy, but close enough to Jude. Close enough to rebuild something at our own pace. One afternoon, maybe a month later, we went to a baseball game. Cheap seats, popcorn, the kind of sunburn you only notice after it's too late. Between innings, he turned to me and asked, You ever think about getting a dog? I laughed. Only if it's got 3 legs and a tragic backstory. Perfect, he said. We'll find one together. And just like that, the man I thought I lost became my son again. Not because of some dramatic confrontation, not because anyone won or lost, but because the truth finally had room to breathe. And it brought us back home.